thank you so much for having us, and I'm really honored to be here and you having us. Thank you so much.
The honor is all on us. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I have several questions about you and about your history and about how it has been for the Tibet. First one, I would like to know, you were born in India,
Yes.
a refugee camp. How is it to be born as a Tibetan in a foreign country? And how was it for a young kid like you at that moment to be in a foreign country but being a Tibetan as well?
There are no comparisons in the sense that we were born in exile in India. If I had seen Tibet, then it would have been a position for me to compare what was in Tibet and how it is in exile. So there's no way for us to compare, because that was the only experience we had. Our parents came from Tibet in 1959-60, and then slowly Tibetans were put up in the compact communities in India. So now we are spread in more than 10 different states and 2 union territories in the whole of India. So from east to west to north to south. And the place where I was born is in South India. Of course, it's a small Tibetan community there, surrounded by all Indians. But then you don't see that much difference, because the Tibetan language came from India. Tibetan religion also came from India. So your way of life is also dictated by the religion that you practice. So I tell my Indian friends, we look different, a little bit different, because we are Tibetan and maybe small eyes, flat nose and all that. But our brain is very similar to Indians, so that you don't find too much difference. But then growing up in a refugee community with very minimal facilities those days, because our parents left everything behind in Tibet. They had no valuables of any sort, so all they could do was hard labor. Even before we were settled, many Tibetans died because we were not used to Indian weather, Indian food, Indian way of life. We didn't speak any Indian languages, and we had no skill whatsoever. And not many Tibetans have come out of Tibet, even when Tibet was independent, because Tibet is so high, you know. We describe our land in the Tibetan prayers also. You say, Kangri Rave Kowe Shinkham Dir, which means the heavenly abode, the realm surrounded by snow mountain ranges. So you have Himalayas in the south, you have the Karakoram in the west of Tibet, Kunlun in the north, and so many mountain ranges in the east. So Tibet was very high, and you're talking about 12,000 feet or 3,700, 800 meters average altitude. The highest are much more than that. And just before our interview, I was telling our friends also, when I was in Japan, I asked them, which is your highest mountain? They said, Mount Fuji. How high? 3,700, 800 meters. And I said, that is like base camp in Tibet. And our friends here were also asking me, are you feeling the altitude here? And for us, this is like plains. So that's why not many Tibetans have come out. And because of the heat and weather conditions in India, Tibetans were slowly put up in the foothills of Himalayas to work, because the climatic conditions are a little more suitable. And the only thing they could do was hard labor. So they worked on road construction. But when we were settled down slowly, then we were given farms, 1 acre of land for one person, dry land. So when we grew up, we started working on the farms. We had our cows, so we have to milch, we have to feed the cows, we have to make cow dung breads and dry it up for fuel. So all those kind of things we were used to, working hard on the field while studying and all that. So even when we were very small, we had a lot of reverence for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And my father always used to tell me that once you finish your education, you have to work for the Tibetan cause, you have to serve His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And that is what inspired us, even when we were a child, that we know exactly what we want to do. So from a very young child, from my childhood, I was determined that I should work for the cause. And now, over the years, from my school days, I was school captain for many years. Then my university days, then we started Tibetan freedom movement in Indian cities, and we started working there. After I finished my university, then I was elected to we have 3 provinces in Tibet, as you know. Central Tibet, northeastern Tibet called Amdo, southeastern Kham. So each of these 3 provinces have their central executive committees in Dharamsala. And I was elected as the General Secretary to that post. 2 years after that, then I got elected to the Parliament in 1996. So for 20 years, I served in the Tibetan Parliament in exile. And during those times, 7.5 years, I worked in Delhi as the Director of Tibetan Parliamentary and Policy Research Center. And 7.5 years, I worked as the President or the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in exile. And then I also served for a little more than a year as representative of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in Washington, D.C. We have an Office of Tibet there. Similar office, some 12 offices around the world, because we have very limited resources, both financial and human. So it's only 3, 4, 5 people in each office. And then when I came back in 2021, then I got elected to this post called Sikyong, or political leader. Some refer to us as Prime Minister, some refer to us as President, but this is an elected post. If you have to stand for my post, then you have to campaign in 25 different countries if you have the resources and the time. But fortunately for me, during the 2021 elections, there was pandemic going on, the COVID-19 was going on, and that I took some principled decisions that I will not go and speak directly to the people. I might get few more votes, but I may put people's life in danger. So I did all my campaign from my home. I didn't move out of my house. So for the first time in Tibetan election, I won the election with online campaigning, not meeting. Even my own people in the same settlement that I live, I said, no, if I don't meet anybody. And we did everything online. And His Holiness has worked very, very hard to introduce democracy since 1960. So we have reached a stage now where we are able to govern ourselves. And that was all because of the upbringing that we had during our childhood days till now. And now the younger generations don't have to do hard work like we do. And that's why I always keep telling the younger generation, you should be much more better than us because you have much more better opportunities. When we were children, there was not even television, to get information from. So whatever I know, I keep learning every single day, every single minute, every single hour. So wherever I reach, I always have a lot of questions. My inquisition never ends, and it will not end because till the end of your life, you have to keep learning.
Great. So you mentioned the word Sikyong. I would like to know what Sikyong means, what it is about. Could you tell us?
Sikyong was a political post in Tibet, which is more like the political leader of that time. And we also have another term called Gyetsab. Gyetsabs are the intermediary rulers in between one Dalai Lama and the other Dalai Lama during the reincarnation process and growing up period. Then somebody else take that responsibility. So this word Sikyong was put into our context only from 2012-13. It used to be there in Tibet. So the Central Tibetan Administration, as we call ourselves, and some people refer to us as the government in exile, is a continuation of the legitimate government of Tibet when Tibet was an independent country. So that is why this name Sikyong has its preeminence in history as well as its significance now in the Tibetan diaspora political situation.
Right. Oh, so you were saying the government in exile. I think our people would like to know why exile. What happened? Why is this government in exile?
Now, Tibet has always been an independent country. At one time, between 7th to 9th century, Tibet was a huge empire in Central Asia. Tibet is a landlocked country. It's 2.5 million square kilometers, very high, top of the world. Some call it the roof of the world. Some call it the water tower of Asia. The Chinese environmental scientists now call Tibet as the third pole. So Tibet has always remained an independent state, whether it's our relation with the Mongols in the 13th century, because Chinese government now say that Tibet is part of China since time immemorial. I don't know when time immemorial is. When do we go back in time and say when is time immemorial? Earlier they used to say Tibet became part of China in 8th century or 7th century because a Tibetan emperor had a Chinese consort. So if that logic is true, then the same emperor had a Nepalese consort also. Then Nepal can also claim over Tibet, you know. And he had a lot of other queens also, Tibetan queens. So that they could not prove. Now our relations with the Mongols were there much before, but again re-established in 13th century, because Tibet disintegrated for about 400 years, between 9th to 13th century. And then Mongols became a big power in Central Asia, led by Genghis Khan and the lineage of Khans after following him. And we developed relation with the 5th Khan, the Kublai Khan, and Kublai's father, Godan Khan, with the Sakyapas at that time. Gelugpas didn't exist at that time. So in the 13th century, the Sakyapas became the religious tutors to the Mongols, and we developed this priest-patron relationship. And then Sakyapas were protecting us politically. The Mongols were protecting us politically. Now, Mongols invaded China. Kublai Khan invaded China in 1271. And only then it became the Yuan dynasty in China, from 1271 to 1368. For Chinese, Yuan dynasty is only that period when the Mongols ruled China. But we had relations with the Mongols much before the Mongols invaded China. So you can understand, comparative history, you can prove it was an independent state. And then the Mongols were overthrown by the Mings in China. Then they ruled, the Mings were the real Chinese. They ruled China from 1368 to 1644. And for us in Tibet, within that 300 years, we had 3 dynasties following the Sakyapas. So Sakyapas ruled for about 100 years in the 13th century till the mid 14th century. And there was another 100 years of Pamadrupa dynasty, another 100 years of Rinpoche dynasty, and there was another 100 years of Debacangpa dynasty before the 5th Dalai Lama took the temporal and spiritual leadership of Tibet. So the 5th Dalai Lama took over the temporal leadership and spiritual leadership of Tibet in 1642. And 2 years after that, in China, the Mings were overthrown by the Qings. And Qings are not Chinese, they are the Manchus. And the Manchus ruled China from 1644 to 1911. So Tibet was ruled from 1642, 2 years before Manchus came in, to till now by the successive Dalai Lamas, from the 5th Dalai Lama to the 14th Dalai Lama. And we had also war with India, with Kashmir, with Nepal, with Bhutan. Small wars, no major wars, but we didn't have any major war with any Indian kingdoms, in that sense, the main Indian territory. So because we had a lot of respect for India, because as I mentioned before, our language and religion also came from India. We look up to India as our guru, our teacher. Then Britishers also came to India in 1903-04 in the form of Young Husband Expedition. They invaded the capital of Tibet in 1904, and then they left Tibet after signing a trade treaty with the Tibetans. And then the Chinese came in around 1910, and the 13th Dalai Lama had to flee to Mongolia and China. Mongolia first, when Britishers came, and when the Chinese came to Tibet, he had to flee to India in 1910. And at that time, he was in exile for only 2 years. In 1912, he returned back, and then he reiterated Tibet's independence alongside Mongolia. So Tibet remained independent, and then China went into civil war with nationalist movement. Then you have the Kuomintangs, then you have the communists and all that. And then communists invaded Tibet, communist China. When Mao Zedong came into power, he invaded Tibet in October 1950. And he forced us to sign what is the so-called 17-point agreement in May 1951. So that is why when I tell governments, I also tell them that this 17-point agreement is not legal. It's null and void because it was under international law. Any agreement cannot be considered legal if it is by force. So whether it's happening to Ukraine now or it happened to Tibet some little more than 70 years ago, it's the same international law. But at that time, international community was not there to support us. There was also a parallel war in Korea in 1950. So there were many things. And then we were forced to sign this 17-point agreement. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama also tried to live under that for 8 long years from 1951 to 59. Then China trampled on all the provisions of those 17-point agreement. And then His Holiness had to flee into exile. And we became refugees, political refugees in India. And today, we are only about 130,000 Tibetans in exile, about 70,000 in India, about 10,000 in Nepal, 1,000 in Bhutan, and about 50,000 in the rest of the world, including North America, Canada, United States, and many countries in Europe, Australia, Japan. So now you find Tibetans in some 25 different countries. And that is why this government is called the government in exile. But we are very unique. We are the only government in exile that has all the structures of a democratic polity. So today you have Supreme Justice Commission, which is the judiciary for us. Since we live in India, we have to conform to Indian laws. But this Supreme Justice Commission functions more like an arbitration, even though we follow due processes of law, but it functions more like an arbitration rather than a court. Then we have a parliament with 45 members. So Tibet traditionally was divided into 3 provinces. Each of these 3 provinces elect 10 members each, irrespective of the number of electorate, the number of people who vote for them. And then we have 4 Buddhist tradition and 1 pre-Buddhist religion called Pon. Each of them elect 2 members, so 30 plus 10, 40. And then Tibetans in North America and South America elect 2 members. Tibetans in Europe and Africa elect 2 members. Tibetans outside India, Nepal, Bhutan in the Asia-Australasia region elect 1 member. So today we have 45 members, but we are the only practicing partyless democracy in this world. So we don't have parties, we don't have political parties. So in which sense, every single member is a political party unto itself. And you have the freedom to use your conscience. Unless you surrender that to somebody else, you can use your conscience to vote for whatever issues you want. And we are unicameral. We don't have 2 houses. We are only 1 house because we live in exile community. And our democracy is a combination of both presidential and parliamentary democracy, whereas the election of the Sikyong happens like president in the United States or other democracies. And the parliament is more like the parliamentary democracy in India. So the Sikyong Sikyong has to nominate ministers in the house. And if there is objection, then it has to be approved by a simple majority. Otherwise, you get nominated. But the Sikyong and ministers are not part of the house. So we can take part in all the process of the house, process and procedures, but have no right to vote. So only the members vote. So there are some peculiarities or uniqueness, as you would see it, very different from other democracies, but the essence of democracy is very much there. And it all evolved in the last 70 years through many stages, learning, through error, fine-tuning, and we have reached a stage, and this is also because of the effort of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He is a true democrat because he went to China in 1954-55 and he saw how communist government functioned. He met with Mao Zedong, Zhou Enlai, all those leaders at that time. Everything seemed very orderly, but people have no freedom to speak, express their mind or thinking. And then he visited India in 1956-57 before we came into exile, and he found it quite chaotic. Everybody was speaking, but then everybody had the freedom to speak. So he was very inspired by democracy, and he introduced democracy as early as 1960 just 1 year after coming into exile under very, very difficult circumstances. And he already had framed a constitution for Tibet in 1963. So all these were due to His Holiness' farsightedness and his vision, and adopting democracy was one of them. And he knew that he will not live forever. Just like now, His Holiness we just celebrated his 88th birth anniversary. And in 2001 also, when he wanted to bring more changes, he said, I'm not going to live forever, so you have to bring more changes now. So depending on Tibetan people's capacity to absorb democracy, to practice democracy, His Holiness has been devolving his responsibilities over the time. So from 91 to 2001 to 2011. So 2011, His Holiness said, I'm going to devolve all my political and administrative responsibilities. So today, His Holiness is very much there as our guide. He is our free spokesperson, but he does not interfere in administration or anything. Only when it comes to China, only when it comes to negotiation, only when it comes to resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict, then His Holiness will be involved.
Okay, since we're talking about His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, I heard that he's been talking about the middle way approach into the Sino-Tibetan situation.
Yes.
What is the middle way approach? What it is all about, and how can we express that in the regular life, in our lives?
You very well know middle way is a Buddhist concept. It's a religious concept, avoiding any kind of extremes. So this approach was adopted as a political policy, so we call it the middle way policy of the Central Tibetan Administration, to try to seek a solution to the Sino-Tibet conflict. So what it means to say is, we avoid extreme polarities. In this case, the one polarity is the independent status of Tibet historically. And the other polarity is the situation of Tibet right now under the repressive Chinese government. So we have to find a middle way where the Tibetans will have the freedom to preserve its language, to practice its religion and its way of life, to promote its culture, and also to protect its environment. So these are some of the things that we are looking at, because Tibetans are very unique. We live on this top of the world, and we have been practicing Buddhism, which is based on non-violence and love and compassion. And right now in this world, even in the 21st century, when we expected this world to be much more peaceful because people are more educated, people are much more economically better than before, but people are still fighting. Now you see so many violent hotspots all around the world. And this message of peace and non-violence is very, very relevant even today. So that is why His Holiness started thinking about this middle way. When we came into exile from 1959 to 1973-74, we have always been asking for independence because Tibet was an independent state. Now, 93, when I say 1973, you should also understand what was going on inside Tibet. Because 1966 to 76 was cultural revolution in China, in the whole of China, including Tibet. So a lot of things old were being destroyed, and so many old things were destroyed or being destroyed in Tibet, and that was the height of cultural revolution. And then His Holiness must have been worried that if everything is destroyed inside Tibet, there will be nothing left. So that's why he thought maybe it's better, instead of seeking independence, try to live with the Chinese, and that if the Chinese can give us the freedom to protect our language, culture, religion, way of life and environment, then we should be happy with that. So that was the essence of middle way. And even though China calls the Tibet regions as autonomous, Tibet Autonomous Region, Tibet Autonomous Prefecture, Tibet Autonomous County, but in China it's only in name, not in practice. So what we are seeking is not just middle way, but genuine autonomy. Autonomy not just in name, but also in practice. We have studied so many cases of autonomy around this world, you know. So and by not seeking independence, we are addressing the major and the biggest concern of China, which is sovereignty. So if Chinese leaders have common sense, then Sino-Tibet conflict is the most easiest conflict to be resolved. Because we are not fighting violently. We are saying we want to live within the framework of the Chinese constitution, but we need this freedom to protect ourselves and our identity. So that is the middle way, and there's nothing wrong with the middle way. We are very, very confident that middle way is the right path. And I also want to mention that His Holiness has always taken a lot of inspiration from the concept of the European Union, because you think about the common interests. And if it had not been for the European Union, many countries in Europe would still be fighting each other and killing each other. So because of that concept of common interests, the Union is for common interests. So in Asia also, why can't we think about more common interests? Because Chinese are also human beings, Tibetans are also human beings, Indians are also human beings. We are only divided by boundaries, right? And the faith and other things that we practice. So otherwise, if we realize the oneness of humanity that His Holiness keeps talking about, all these 8 billion people in the world are same. Your color may be different, your height may be different, but then we are all same in human beings, and we all have the same potential of intelligence, unlike other animals. So if we understand that, then there will be broader understanding. In the case of Xi Jinping also, his father, himself, they both suffered a lot under Mao Zedong. Now the same president is copying Mao Zedong to control other people. That is very unfortunate. Actually, Xi Jinping should have learned lesson in his life and be more kind to other people, not like what he is doing now.
Thank you. You were mentioning the autonomous region of Tibet, and such a big word, no? Autonomy. The Chinese say that Tibet is like a paradise.
Yes.
Socialist
paradise.
Socialist paradise. Is that really a paradise, or it's at some point I hear from you like a prison, a beautiful prison, but a prison? How is it?
Tibet as a land is like a paradise. It's very pristine, it's very clean. It has its bounties of nature, you know, both flora and fauna, which are very, very unique to Tibet's environment. But what China is saying is the political aspect of it, where people are living in a paradise, in a socialist paradise. So that's why we keep saying the short answer to this is, if Tibet is a socialist paradise, then why don't you allow other people to visit the socialist paradise and see for themselves whether it's a paradise or a hell that China has created? So it's not just propaganda that you can convince people. It's not just mere words that you can convince people. Now today, if you have to travel to Tibet, coming from Colombia, if you have a visa to go to China, you can go to China, but then to go to Tibet, you have to have another visa, another permit. So it's like going to another third country. That is why we have friends in the US Congress who have passed this law called the Reciprocal Access to Tibet Act, whereas a United States citizen has a visa to go to China and they have to have another permit to go to Tibet. If a Chinese person has a visa to come to the United States, they can visit any part of the United States. So diplomacy is all about reciprocity. And in this case, there is no reciprocation. Even in business, there is no reciprocation. If we could talk about that, you have only WeChat in Tibet, in China, which is a Chinese app, or Baidu, or these social media networks. They don't allow WhatsApp, they don't allow Telegram or X or, you know, all those things. So it's not an equal relationship when it comes to China. It has always been an unequal relationship.
There's a word that has been very important to me, that is compassion. What compassion to you? How do you feel compassion is, and how this thing of compassion could be applied to the Tibetan situation right now?
You know, from a spiritual, religious point of view, the word compassion is a very heavy word, as you said, because when we think about compassion, normally people relate that to love, and for an ordinary person, your love would be to your family members, to your wife, to your parents, to your children. That is more. But from a Buddhist perspective, love and compassion should extend beyond your immediate relations. If you can transcend these things, then you have real compassion. Not just for not any other human being, even for animals, other animals. You know, even when we are children, we are taught, don't kill mosquitoes, don't kill ants, don't kill this bird. So from a very young age, you are taught this, to be compassionate. Why do you kill? Why do you hurt? So compassion is a concept, if practiced in reality, in its real essence, then it should transcend all relationships, even to your opponent. That's why we don't call China our enemy. Some people like to use that word enemy. We call China opponent, because we don't believe in this animosity. You know, China destroyed our people, China destroyed our culture, China killed our people, and they destroyed our monasteries and all that. But still, we don't feel anger for the Chinese. We only feel pity, you know, because of their bigotry, because of their ignorance. They did all this, you know, so we feel pity for them. And that is the level of compassion that you should take. And there were political prisoners from Tibet who used to say that when I was prisoned, I was afraid that I would lose my compassion towards the Chinese, because they are always torturing you, you know. So that is, and when you have an opponent like that, then that gives you a real chance for you to practice your compassion, and that's how we see it.
How the political government you represent, the Tibetan government that you represent, could help in world peace, and how can we translate it, for example, in Peace for Colombia? What would be that message around the peace concept?
Peace.
Peace.
When His Holiness devolved his political and administrative responsibilities, then many people said, oh, today there's a separation of church and politics. And if you ask that same question to His Holiness would always say, if you are a politician and if you follow spirituality, then you will make a very good politician. You know? So with that thinking, and even when you are governing, even when you are in politics, if you have the feeling of altruism, of helping others, of being benevolent, means thinking of betterment of others, then that spirit spreads, and that itself spreads more peace in the community. So if you enter into politics and if you think only about how to gain more power, how to make more money, then you are not serving your people. You are serving only yourself and your personal interests, your individual interests, and that will not spread more peace. Once you start thinking more about benefit of others, whether it's your own people or other people, then only you spread the message of peace.
Thank you. There's something called, if I'm not mistaken, the Order Number 5
Yes.
in the Chinese. What is Order Number 5 and what it's all about, and how does it affect the future years about the transmission of the lamas and all the spiritual aspects of the Buddhism?
So Buddhists believe in life after death. And the system of reincarnation, meaning once a person dies, then if that person is spiritually high, then that person has the capacity to be reborn to serve humanity in the next life also. So the Lamas always pray that till the end of this world, may I be reborn to serve others. And that concept is very unique to Tibetans, even though there are many Buddhist countries that practice the Sanskrit tradition in Japan, China, South Korea, Vietnam, in the Himalayan region, in Mongolia, Tibet, and all these countries. We all practice the Mahayana tradition or the Sanskrit tradition. And then there are other countries like Sri Lanka, Burma, Laos, Cambodia. These countries practice the Pali tradition. But whatever, now I'm losing you. What was the question?
We were talking about the order number 5.
Yeah, the order number 5. So there, in other Buddhist countries, you don't find this concept of reincarnation. So it's very unique to Tibet. So when we talk about reincarnation, then you already know, let's not talk about other reincarnations. There are many reincarnations, but at least in the context of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, this is the 14th reincarnation. So the Chinese government is not bothered about the living 14th Dalai Lama who is in India. They are more bothered about the yet to come 15th Dalai Lama, because they know that if they can control the 15th Dalai Lama, they can control the people of Tibet. That is why China has been always thinking about how to control Tibet and how to look for Dalai Lama's reincarnation some more than 2 decades. And every time they are the ones to talk about it. And that's why they issued this order number 5 in 2007 to say that the communist government will be responsible for recognition of the reincarnated lamas, or what they call as living Buddhas. So that law says that the Chinese communist government will be responsible. So His Holiness' response is very simple in his very humorous way. He says, if the Chinese government is really serious about reincarnation, they should study Tibetan Buddhism. They should look for, first, Mao Zedong's reincarnation, second, Deng Xiaoping's reincarnation, and now even Jiang Zemin is no more with us. So maybe look for Jiang Zemin's reincarnation, then maybe the Dalai Lamas, because they are not the authority to look for reincarnations. So my message to the Chinese government is, have you not learned enough lessons from the Panchen Lama saga? Because the 10th Panchen Lama died in 1989. In fact, if there had been an autopsy or a forensic done on his body, I'm sure we can prove that he was killed by the Chinese government, because he was very healthy and then suddenly he died in 1989. Then his rebirth, the young boy, there were several, and there was a search committee set by the Chinese government of Tibetan monks. So the Tibetan monks also informed His Holiness about the search selection and all that, and His Holiness selected one, which is his right to select next Panchen Lama, not the Chinese government's right. And the Chinese government became very, very angry because of His Holiness' decision. And then they took away that boy. We still don't know. Since 1995, we don't know where that boy is, where his families are, where his teacher is, or the selection committee's chair. We don't know whether they are alive or not. So that is how Chinese government functions. There were a lot of requests from UNHCR, high commissioners also, but all Chinese government say, oh, he doesn't want to disturb, he doesn't want to be disturbed, he's fine, but they don't tell him. We don't know anything about the Panchen Lama. So the Chinese selected their own Panchen Lama, another boy. Now that boy is not recognized by the Tibetans inside Tibet. So normally this boy would have to live in Shigatse, which is the traditional seat of Panchen Lamas, but he lives most of the time in Beijing. And when he was sent to Tibet sometimes, Chinese government has to pay money to receive him, or Chinese government has to pay money to listen to his teachings, just to show the world that Tibetans respect Chinese Panchen Lama. And another case is the way the Tibetans inside react to this is, since they cannot sell picture of the Dalai Lama's Panchen Lama, and they don't want to sell the pictures of Chinese Panchen Lama. So on the streets of Lhasa today, you will see only pictures of the 10th, the previous Panchen Lama. And that's how they show their displeasure. And Chinese Panchen Lama is not respected by other Buddhist countries also. So if China selects one Dalai Lama, and we will definitely select one Dalai Lama as per His Holiness instructions, then I tell the Chinese government, do you want a lifelong headache on your hands? But this is not going to be a one-off incident where people are protesting, you send police, army and quell it and it's done. No, if there are two Dalai Lamas, they will be lifelong, and Xi Jinping will not be there in this world by that time. But this problem will keep persisting. So let religious and spiritual matter rest with the Tibetans. You do a better job in governance. That is what is expected of the Chinese government, not to interfere in religious activities which you don't believe in. And don't try to use every situation into a political situation. That does not help anybody.
Thank you so much. Well, we are getting to our final part of our interview. Thank you so much again.
Thank you.
Is there any last thoughts or last message you want to share with our audience regarding the Sikyong point of view?
If there has to be real peace in this world, everyone must be broad-minded to understand the oneness of humanity, and that every human being has the same right, whether you come from this part of the world or that part of the world. And I also want to assure that non-violence is the best and the only means of resolving problems. Violence begets more violence. Just like Mahatma Gandhi said, if you take up violence and do eye for an eye, then the whole world will become blind. So do we want the whole world to be blind or not? We want all world to be, happy and be able to see for themselves the good things in life. So if that has to happen, then we have to stick to non-violence as a resolution to any conflict. Violence is not going to take us anywhere. And then one also have to understand that we live in an interdependent world. We don't live in isolation. So any single event that happens in some part of the world will have its impact, big or small, in other parts of the world. And we have learned it from the Ukraine experience. Now, Russia invading Ukraine, how much it has become impacted, how much it has impacted the whole world. And it shows the interdependence of nature of our existence. And also the fact that whoever is suffering in this world, I think deserves support. Tomorrow it could be yourself. And when you are suffering, you need support from other people. So when others are suffering, they also expect help from other people. So in that sense, we have not lost hope. Tibetans inside Tibet has not lost hope. Our friends in Uyghur, our friends in Mongolia, they have not lost hope. So you also should not lose hope. We have to carry on this torch of non-violence and peace in this world to make it a better world to live in. Whether you follow any religion or not doesn't matter. Whether you are an atheist or a religious person, you just bring out the best in yourself, as His Holiness always says, and this world will definitely be a better world to live in.